Get ready. The DE Talk podcast starts now. Insightful conversations and dialogue helping you put the human factor back in HR. Without question, AI is here to stay. Between the automation and solutions available, it's transforming nearly every part of the recruiting process, from sourcing and screening to interviewing, hiring, and onboarding. But with those advancements come challenging times that many TA teams are grappling with: bots and AI-driven candidate fraud. Today, we're tapping into industry expert Dwaine Maltais, the Chief Strategy Officer at Nexxt, diving into what candidate fraud really looks like today, why it's increasing so rapidly, and how recruiters can spot red flags before fraudulent candidates make it too far into the hiring process. We'll also talk about the risks to employers, from wasted time and budget to serious security concerns, and what practical steps organizations can take to protect their hiring efforts while still delivering a strong candidate experience.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the DE Talk podcast. I'm your host, Shannon Offord, VP of Strategic Partnerships here at Direct Employers. Today, we've got an exciting episode, and we're going to talk about something that a lot of people in TA are grappling with, and that is bots and AI-driven candidate fraud. And I could think of no better guest to have on the podcast than Dwaine Maltais, Chief Strategy Officer of Nexxt. Over the last few years, I've gotten a chance to know Dwaine a little bit better and know he is very well versed in this subject. So welcome, Dwaine.
Thanks, Shannon. Great to be here and also really excited about the topic. We deal with it a lot over at Nexxt. I know our clients and employers do. I know your employers do as well. So I'm excited to get a chance to spend some time together on it.
Yeah, well, I'm excited and looking forward to having a conversation. So before we get started, just tell us just a little bit about yourself and Nexxt.
So Nexxt is a talent sourcing platform. You may have known us in various incarnations over the years with our network of job boards, our database of 150 million candidates for sourcing, programmatic advertising. So all things kind of top of the funnel, helping employers reach talent at scale. So that's a little bit about Nexxt, and a little bit about me is as you said, I'm the Chief Strategy Officer. A number of things that I do at Nexxt to kind of focus on our strategic initiatives and areas of growth and innovation. And one of the areas that I've been focusing a lot on over the past couple of years is candidate fraud, bots, and all the things that I think we're going to talk about today as we kind of go through this. So like I said, really excited about the topic. It's timely. We deal with it every day, and I know it's becoming a bigger and bigger problem for employers.
Well, obviously, fraud in recruiting is not new. It's been around probably since, people started trying to find employment. Why is it becoming such a big issue lately?
You're right. I mean, it's not new, and I agree. Companies been dealing with employment fraud and recruiting fraud, frankly, since the space began and folks started hiring people. I think the difference today, though, is the reality is I think there's three main drivers that we're experiencing today, which is different from the past. So A is just the rise and pervasiveness of AI. It's everywhere. It's being touted as the solution for everything. Being touted as the problems for a lot of things too, but AI is definitely a key driver. I think the other one that is maybe not as impactful, but certainly right there in the number 2 slot, it's advances in automation. That's also helped through AI, so that's not a standalone, but I think more than ever before, automation tools have become really sophisticated and they've also become really accessible. And I think that's the third leg of the stool, accessibility. AI and automation in the form of easy to use tools. They're freely available in a lot of cases. They're literally everywhere. So in my mind, AI plus automation plus accessibility, those three pieces come together to make the trifecta. And I think it creates a perfect environment for fraud and recruiting to grow. And I think that's what we're seeing.
And I guess we should have really probably gotten more of a definition of what candidate fraud is today. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and maybe give more of a definition of that?
Sure. I mean, well, I guess my simple way of thinking about it is, anyone that's intentionally misrepresenting their identity, skill set, qualifications, experience during the hiring process is a good definition of candidate fraud. It really hasn't changed, just like the practice from that standpoint. But it's it's not a mistake on a resume. It's not trying to put your best foot forward. It's literally a misrepresentation, and it generally is intentional in that regard. So That's what I kind of consider the definition. I don't know if that's kind of the same one you consider, but I think that's
Yeah.
the way I would.
Yeah, that's exactly. I just wanted to make sure that we all kind of level set. We knew we were kind of talking on the about the same thing. So AI, like you mentioned, obviously, pretty much everywhere you go, people are talking about AI. If you go to McDonald's or some of the other restaurants out there, AI is there as well. Specifically around bots. I just quickly, I was at McDonald's a couple months back, and I was talking. She asked my wife what she wanted, ordered the food, whatever, and I'm sitting there having this conversation with what I thought was a real person, and my wife goes, "That's a bot, right?" And I felt kind of silly. What really, as it relates to bots, what's changed to make them a bigger threat in today's recruiting?
So, I mean, you're right. Automation in the form of bots have been around for lots and lots of years.
They keep getting
They
better
work
and better.
exactly. They work behind the scenes. They automate redundant tasks. They're helpful in many ways from that standpoint. Way back in 1998, Google came online and started using a crawler to go and visit websites, and that's how they built their data index of all the places that you can search and find there. That's a bot, still is a bot. Googlebot's still out there today running today. And that same concept of automation, I think, has evolved a lot technically over the years. But again, back to the point that I was making before, it's also become a lot more accessible. So bots are not controlled by data scientists for data scraping and the things anymore that were happening back then. Bots are used to automate routine tasks. Because if you look at some of the advancements, as you said, in AI, combining with that automation in bots, they're sitting on their desktop. I use Windows, and there's a lot of new tools and bots showing up on my Windows 11 desktop every day. And so, I mean, I think it's that pervasiveness, that accessibility of them, I think really drives some of what is becoming the threat around AI and bots. And then, now they're getting specialties. So you don't have to go out and find a general purpose tool and train it and teach it how to do things, job seeking or recruiting. They're specialized for that. And so the AI, the tools, the bots now can drive really advanced automation for finding jobs and mass applying for jobs, participating in interviews, all throughout screening and selection, and really just getting deeper into the hiring process and even leading to fraudulent hires, which we'll talk about, in a few minutes. But, bots and AI driving those bots are really being used more and more today. They're everywhere. And as you said, they're really being used for both good things and also fraudulent things that we're talking about.
Yeah. I think I was actually looking at this article the other day, and it talked about there was a 70% rise in fraud and recruiting and interviewing and that type thing. And I know you mentioned accessibility, and I know that's a big part of that. But are there other reasons why you think this is happening as well, or is it?
Yeah, that 70%, I think that was a Forbes article on one of their reports, and coming from HR leaders, so right from the folks that are experiencing it. On the Y side, I look at it, the current job market doesn't help.
Yeah, well,
It's tough to find a
there's
job
that.
right now. The process of applying to jobs, it's redundant, it's cumbersome, it can be super frustrating. I think it also is magnified by candidates that get little or no feedback after applying to a job. It feels like it's not a human thing to do, right? I mean,
Yeah,
I'm going out, I'm searching for a job, I'm spending 10 minutes, I hope 20, 30, 40 minutes applying for a job, and I hit the button finally and it goes in, and maybe I hear back. Many times I won't. So I think that can be, the tools and understanding if there's something out there as a job seeker that can give me an advantage. That's going to be super tempting now. And then with all of the pervasiveness of AI and automation there as well, it just magnifies it. So, there's that kind of driver that's out there for the reality of what people are experiencing in the market today. And then you've got, truly bad actors. You've got foreign entities using the same tools, maybe not the exact same tools, maybe the exact same tools in some cases, not just to get a job, but to actually infiltrate companies as employees or contractors. So I think the technology is available. It's come an incredible, exponentially long ways, and it's a tough market right now. So I think there's a lot of, it's not just a single thing that I think is driving it. There's a lot of reasons that I think folks are finding these tools and in some cases abusing these tools to try and get an advantage.
Yeah, we at our annual meeting last year, we had a session around AI, and one of our members was talking about how one of her recruiters actually had told her that one of the candidates had used an avatar instead of putting themselves on camera, and was like, you know what, that had to be a fake interview. I know there's some scenarios like that. I know that there's situations where, people are even using actors and all these other things. Do you think this is becoming really common, or is it just kind of one-offs, or what do you think the prevalence
I think
is?
it's more common than you might think. I went and did a little more research on that as well. Again, at Nexxt, we sit on the front end of the process, right? So a lot of times, our exposure is in that initial connection point versus kind of the downstream interactions, the interviewing, what have you. But it's more common than you would think. I was just reading CrowdStrike released a report in August. In the last 12 months, they were seeing AI fraud, and in particular, deep fake AI fraud. So the types of things you were saying, not just avatars, but actual humans or look like humans, kind of working through those things, either in imagery or voice or video. But anyways, in the report they released in August, it showed that North Korean software developers had infiltrated 320 companies using AI, deepfakes, automation. So that was a much bigger footprint than I would have thought, and that increase in use is a much bigger use than I would have thought. And granted, that's a pretty sophisticated approach. That I think used a large network of resources. It wasn't just AI fakes and videos. It was folks feeding other people information and networks and a lot of things going on. But if you read that report, it was really interesting to see the level of sophistication and coordination combined with the technology there. So, I mean, clearly it's happening. And at least in the short term, the pace is increasing.
I mean, I've heard of situations where before they answer a question, they're kind of conferring with some of the different AI tools that are out there. But, I wasn't real sure how prevalent these deepfake interviews really are. I mean, you obviously hear onesie twosie situations, but it sounds like it's becoming more and more common. What should recruiters be watching out for in regards to these types of interviews?
Well, you're right. I mean, it's not all about a deep fake, right? I mean, that's not where it's all happening. So it's different forms. To your point, can be as simple as somebody looking up an answer, while you're having a conversation with them in virtual interviews, which may or may not be allowed. So I mean, that's not always a bad thing necessarily, but if you're presenting it as it's extemporaneous, then that can be a problem. Another report is I kind of look at and look for evidence of that, out in the market. HR Dive did a report that 25% of hiring managers are now reporting that they've run into imposters during their interviews. That's in research that's been in the past year, and that they're seeing, more and more use of deepfake video and or audio incorporated into it. Recruiters have got to be watching for it. They've got to be listening for it, reading for it, for inconsistencies and those types of responses, the behaviors, and just generally looking for inconsistencies with engaging with candidates, whether digitally or in person. I think one of the main things to kind of look for is what's being represented to you. Is it verifiable? Not every sentence, not every word, but the material skills, the material experience, the material proof that you are who your digital paper says you are, they're verifiable things. And how can you tease those things out is really what recruiters should be looking for in their experiences there.
And obviously before an interview can ever take place, obviously there probably is a resume involved. What are your thoughts around AI generated resumes, which obviously I think is very common today, but I do think there's a level of fraud that can be involved there as well.
Sure, but I mean, I think it's the line that you cross when you're misrepresenting something versus, again, trying to put your best foot forward. I mean, how many resume writing services are still out there and have been out there for years to try and help you improve your resume, your digital presence? None of that's new. That's not AI's fault, right? That's just someone really trying to put their best foot forward. Not everyone is a great writer. Not everyone can introspectively look at their experience and skills and time and career and turn that into a good narrative on paper or digital paper. So in that regard, I don't have any problem with it. It's when it crosses the line of reality into going beyond just putting your best foot forward into making things up. I think that's the line that gets crossed. That's when we go into fraud. That's where employers I know have a problem. I think, I have a problem with it from that standpoint. It's not necessarily the use of the tools, but when you cross the line from something that is true and verifiable about you and your experience related to the position that you're interested in or the career that you're interested in versus just making things up. And, even, and one more point there is, AI by default, if you're putting your resume in and you're asking it to clean it up, I mean, outside of inserting a few more in dashes in there, its intent is to reorganize the data. Certainly you have to proof it and make sure new stuff isn't being injected into it. But, that's not really one of those cases where we hear things like hallucinations and oops, I was the CEO of Amazon in my last role. That's not an oops, right? That's not even an AI oops. That's deliberate, and it takes someone with intention, that lets those things through. So it's not all technology and AI's fault in that regard. But when you're misrepresenting something, we'll just go back to our definition of fraud. I think that's where it crosses.
Employers are using AI in their recruitment process, and a lot of them are even using AI to help generate job descriptions, to set up interviews, to for interview questions. Employers are using it, and I do think there's probably some level of that where job seekers, candidates can use it as well. But I think, like you mentioned, when they're deliberately trying to misrepresent themselves, I think there becomes an issue. I know of some employers now who are saying, hey, you know what? You can use AI in the process. However, when you're actually, during the interview itself, we'd like to really get to know you and, not, you shouldn't be using those types of tools, during the actual interview itself. So,
I mean, again, and that sets the stage. As long as the ground rules are clear and both sides understand what they are, then again, when you cross that line, the line needs to be clear. But that's when the fraud happens.
How effective do you feel that skills tests, maybe identity verification, and like live problem solving tools are in trying to help eliminate fraud?
I think it helps. I mean, individually, I think they can help. I mean, certainly identity verification, interactive problem solving, whether it's face-to-face or digital face-to-face, that's going to be harder to automate without pauses and changes, at least today, in that regard. So, I think all of those things can kind of help combat fraud. It can help combat determining who could be a bad actor. But I think the real value in that, at least the through line there, is in the layers themselves. That it's not one way of doing. If I use a test, I mean, how many times have you read? I certainly have a lot over the years where well-known employers, a lot of the stories that I've read have always been around kind of technical slanted roles, but we'll have, very specific kind of test questions, both some for very technical skills and some for just how do you behave in a situation. And inevitably you find those questions, those interview questions sitting out on websites and shared, where interview feedback is shared before any of this automation and at least AI as we know it today kind of came into play. So again, I don't think any one of those things are necessarily bulletproof, but the fact that you're layering it in and the fact that you've got visibility across those layers, I think that's where collectively they can help combat the fraud problem. And, it can be tough to orchestrate from HR's perspective to kind of work with those layers because a sourcer can hand off to a recruiter has back and forth with the hiring managers. So there's a lot of different touch points in that pipeline, not only from technology and logistics, but also from candidate experience. So, having someone go through a layered process, absolutely nothing wrong with that. But where I think we have to be really careful is we can't assume that someone is being fraudulent up front. I mean, remember, we're still hiring humans. It's an interview. It's not an interrogation. Or shouldn't be an interrogation from that standpoint. So that's the balance that we have to find a way to strike. But just patently looking at multiple layers of different types of engagement at different times, I think can definitely help root out fraud, root out any fakery that's going on in the back.
I think a lot of companies are so, concerned with, kind of how the interview process goes and making sure that they're making decisions quickly so they're not dragging the process out. I think some employers may be fearful of maybe adding some of those steps because it, like I said, it just takes a little bit longer. But I think, in order to make sure that you're protecting the company, that adding, a step here or there to make sure that you're dealing with real candidates makes a lot of sense.
It does. And we call that, again, we're kind of on the front end of recruiting at Nexxt. And so in our world, we call that good friction when we're kind of looking at it. We don't want to, for us, the last thing in the world that we want to do is put a barrier in front of a potential job seeker showing interest in one of our employers of their jobs. We don't want to put any kind of barrier there. We've had to introduce good friction points along the way to make sure that we're not just helping a bot be passed along downstream into the process. So I agree. It can be costly from a transactional standpoint. It's new training and new processes, but I still think good friction in the process can go a long way to help the fraud problem. Bad friction in the process is just bad friction. It's just going to slow things down. I'm not sure in a lot of ways some of the approaches that I'm seeing pulled forward are really helping it out. And again, I go back to these are candidates, these are people. We have to treat them like people, give them the benefit of the doubt, and try and build that connection to see if it's going to be a fit for them to come into our company or not. But at the end of the day, it's not it shouldn't be bots talking to bots to make these decisions.
What are some of the risks associated with fraudulent candidates actually getting through the process?
So I think, I look at it in, I guess it's not benign, but when I think about it in like the most benign form, it costs companies time and money. It costs companies time and money to engage with a candidate throughout the hiring process. That's recruiters' time, hiring managers' time. Got multiple interview rounds, all that coordination, even though a lot of that's automated these days in certain organizations, candidate testing, all the technology, top of the funnel, all the recruitment marketing costs, that gets wasted. And so, I mean, again, in its most benign form, it's a magnificent waste of time and resources. We were just talking about that friction standpoint. If I've got fake people in a queue, or if I have a real person that's misrepresenting their abilities that I'm considering, then think about the people that I'm not working with and I should be working with. So, I think that's patently, that's across the board. That's a true impact on an organization in cost and quality and time. And then at the other end of the spectrum, it can represent a huge security and intellectual property risk for the company. I mean, real financial impacts that are happening. I mean, again, reading that CrowdStrike report, I can't imagine people showing up, virtually or otherwise in organizations, getting access to all the tools and information as you become a new employee and get started there. And that goes unnoticed for long periods of time. I mean, that is a true risk to the organization. Something has to be done to stop that, to mitigate it, and to make sure that it can be identified.
I think we both obviously work for organizations that have employment websites. And I know there are, a lot of career sites out there as well. An issue all of us, I think, are dealing with is the bot traffic that we see. We're always trying to try to figure out what percentage of the traffic, is related to bots and what is real, and something we struggle with. And I'm sure that you guys do, and I'm sure employers are as well. How does this, kind of impact recruitment marketing and the budgets around that?
Don't you miss when we were looking at the traffic and just saying, well, what's that other category?
Yep.
Or what really is the career website? In a source, what does that mean? How do I get more career website? How do I get more other? Those are the good old days. But yeah, I mean, it is something that we are working every day at Nexxt to combat. It's not new, but if we go all the way back to the top of our conversation with AI, with automation, and the accessibility of it all, with the tools and techniques, we've seen attempted exploits explode over the past few years just through our platforms. And in our view and in reality, that fraudulent traffic, it drives up costs, it lowers quality, and it wastes time again at the very least, but it has meaningful impacts on recruitment marketing budgets, particularly in pay for performance situations. From that standpoint, you look at conversion metrics, you look at engagement metrics and things that used to be able to give you clear signals of something working or something that could need improvement or something you might consider jettisoning for something else. You can't trust that anymore from that standpoint. So, I mean, uncaught, it can lead to bad assumptions on where you invest your time and money in recruitment marketing. And then we've just been talking about the whole downstream effect. As you get further into the hiring process, how does that get magnified? The cost and the waste of time certainly gets magnified, but then the risk skyrockets. So, anywhere there's a path to your career website, anywhere is a target for bots. We're a target for bots. And we filter out that traffic. We identify the traffic. We put good friction in front of that traffic. We look at it, and literally we've seen it explode over the past few years. And we're not the only ones trying to combat it.
No, you are not. If we deal with that every day as well. So I think, people hear bots, for the longest time, every time I would hear that, I'd automatically assume that it was all bad. Like it was always bad actors, whatever. I've since come to realize that it's not always something that's, it's not always a bad thing. How do employers really differentiate between kind of the good and bad in that regard? I mean, are there tools, or are there, if you were an employer, like kind of how would you kind of differentiate the good and the bad bots, I guess?
It's not easy. And you're right. The same tools that fraudsters are using can be similar, or sometimes they can be the exact same tools that candidates use to help them find your jobs or better represent themselves on a resume, or even to help them apply to jobs or prepare for interviews. And I think the bad news for now is that the solutions to determine the good from the bad either don't exist yet, or are buried in the data that HR doesn't have access to, or are training and skills that many recruiters and hiring managers may not have yet, that they certainly need to get that training. So, I mean, the capabilities of the AI and the automation together have clearly outpaced the controls. And that's not just in hiring, that's everywhere. I mean, we hear it on TV all the time, social media and other things where different forms of this are prevalent. And there's lots of companies working on solutions for it. So I expect to see more tools come forward. I expect to see tracking and accountability mature. I expect to see better interoperability between, let's say, companies like Nexxt that are focused on sources, and companies that are providing applicant tracking systems, and companies that are providing downstream interview technology and onboarding and hiring, all of those things to begin to work better together at a data-driven level to better share this information and track and account for this information. But that's not there today. The key there, I look at, you hear things like determining how many applications are being submitted by someone. If you see, many applications by the same person, a lot of different things. Well, the reality is, in a lot of the applicant tracking systems, a recruiter may not be, I as a recruiter and you as a recruiter could be working on different jobs that we don't even see each other's jobs that we're working on. So I don't know if John Smith, the candidate, applied for 12 other jobs. Even if they did, I see that they applied on Tuesday. I don't necessarily see that it was 3 a.m. on Tuesday, and the elapsed time of the application, was a minute and a half when my average is 5 or 7 minutes. So there's all that data that's there, that's buried, but isn't necessarily available for companies when they need it to help them make these decisions. So right now, I think it's a very formative time where we've got to surface more of that information up front so it can be used in this analysis. But we have a ways to go. And then I'll go back to training. For a while, you look at the training that started happening in organizations around phishing and spam and security awareness. We need those same types of training programs for recruiters and hiring managers that aren't just sitting and watching a video that you can turn on your little AI bot and make sure it looks like you're present for the whole video from that standpoint, but things that actually tests, is this happening in reality? And those are needs that I definitely see companies talking about. I see suppliers and vendors in our space talking about and beginning to roll out, what can be solutions there. But I think that the reality is we're a little behind the curve in what we need to bring forward, both in training and in technology, to really be able to make a concerted effort to attack fraud. I don't know if you feel the same way or feel differently about that, but I think
I'm 100% with you. And I think, you talked about, accessibility earlier, and there's several tools out there that allow a candidate, and they've been out there for a while, but I think they're getting better. But there's these obviously tools out there that allow job seekers to apply to jobs, super quickly, and tailor their resume, to those jobs, in a matter of minutes. And they can send out hundreds of resumes to these positions very quickly. I have a lot of mixed feelings on those tools because I think those tools can contribute to a lot of the fraud as well. But yeah, I'm on the same page with you. There definitely aren't enough. Well, the tools have not kept up with, and the fraud detection tools have not kept up with where we are with some of the tools related to AI. I mean, they're so behind. I think they will get there, but as they get there, obviously some of the other tools will get better. It seems like you're always kind of playing catch up, but I mean, training obviously is huge. What do you think about, I know a lot of companies don't do background checks, but I think given the environment we're in right now, before I would offer any employee or potential employee a position, I would definitely do some kind of advanced background check before I would.
Absolutely. Background checks. I mean, anything that can help you verify and validate the information that's in front of you. I think is part of the hiring process. I mean, they're there not to, again, it can be good friction in that regard too, from the standpoint of you don't want to forget about fraud. You don't want to bring someone that may not pass those types of checks into your organization. That's what it's there to protect, from that standpoint. Is the background check the kind of last mile before you move in that direction? We'll see. I think there's other checks along the way that are being implemented that can be done along with identity verification and background checks. So I'm not sure if it solely lives there or if that begins to blend into other layers too. But absolutely, I mean, any verification that the information that you've been given is accurate about the person that you're considering should be fair game to validate. And you should structure the way we interview. We should structure the way we have dialogues with each other, that at least in some part of those dialogues, that there are questions that are very clearly things that would need to be verified in that process. Again, I think it's critical to finding a way to keep a collaborative and hiring process and find great talent without turning it into an interrogation. But sure, I think a background check and the innovations and some of the things that are happening in that space are definitely a key component in the layers.
I think employers need to really lay out clear expectations, through the interview process as well, especially as it relates to AI, what's allowable, what's not, what they expect, what they don't, I think that can also be a tool that's used to maybe reduce some of this.
Absolutely. And if nothing else, a great teaching tool for the AI to get better at doing what it's doing badly.
Well, yeah, there's that.
You give it takes. But absolutely. I mean, having a clearly outlined process, forgetting about our fraud discussion, it helps the candidate's experience. They know what they're in for. They know what they can prepare for. So I definitely think that's a benefit and can help really kind of set the expectations for what to expect.
Well, I have very much enjoyed this conversation. I'm like digging into this whole AI thing more and more every day. I have a lot of interest, around this topic. So I literally could talk to you all day long. But I want to thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate your time. One thing we do on the DE Talk podcast is we have kind of a speed round or lightning round of questions that aren't necessarily related to this topic, but we just want to get to know you better. So I get to ask you a few questions, and they're kind of rapid fire, so I'm going to throw them out pretty quick. So we'll get started with that. Would you rather watch a movie at home or in the theater?
This is going to go against what I think most people would say, but I'm an at-home movie watcher.
My wife and I just had this conversation the other day, and she wants to watch them at home too.
Oh, so you're a theater guy?
I love going to the theater. I was really addicted to the popcorn, in all transparency, but I actually bought a movie-size theater popcorn machine at my house. That's no longer the issue, but I do think there's something to be said about actually going there and watching on the big screen.
Well, I think I'm an introvert. I think you're more of an extrovert. So maybe there's some patterns there. I like the popcorn buckets. I think those are really cool. But I can go get one of those and then I can go back home. I don't have to sit in that theater crunched up behind somebody for 2 or 3 hours. So
I've actually got a stack of them, probably like 80 of them at home. What is your favorite fast food restaurant?
Fast food. Even though I'm on the East Coast, it's going to be In-N-Out.
You know what? That is one of the most common answers. But I'm with it, though. I'm 100% there with you.
Animal style, all day long.
Warm weather or cold weather?
Warm weather. I run from the snow. I run from the cold.
You're back east, so that may not be a good thing.
But I'm down in Wilmington, North Carolina. So other than the hurricanes, we're generally temperate. It's chilly today, though, but outside of that, no snow.
I'm actually staring out my office window right now, and it's coming down fast. So.
Wait, you travel so much. What about you? Cold or warm?
Warm for sure. Warm for sure. Not really a cold weather person. Literally every winter, I say it's going to be my last winter here. And yet here I am still here.
I said that when I was in Connecticut, and I went just outside of Houston and then wanted to get back over to the East Coast and the beach. So like you, I said it and I ended up doing it.
Right. Favorite vacation spot?
Yeah, and this is going to be super boring. It's home. I love spending time at home. We're near the beach, so we can get to the beach. So that's always accessible for us. But just quiet time on the water, near the water, just places where you can just be still, get a little away from technology. That's kind of my favorite area. And a lot of it isn't too far from home. So that's why I say home.
All right. If you weren't in online recruitment, what else would you be doing?
I don't know. That's the sad thing. I've been doing this for so long, and since the early 90s. I don't know. Probably something completely else, like woodworking. Just something with my hands, something not in front of a computer, something that doesn't make me hop on planes a lot. I would try. I think I would probably go in an opposite direction just to see what that's.
Best career advice you've ever received?
Best career advice I've ever received. So I guess pretty early on in my career, before I really started in the recruiting side of space, it really is just the kind of a golden rule. Just treat others as you'd like to be treated from that standpoint. And that's stuck with me over the years as I've worked with people to work for me, people I've worked for. So I think it's a bit of a golden rule, but it holds up.
That's a good one. If people want to learn more about Nexxt or more about this topic, what is the best way to get a hold of you?
So if it's about Nexxt, you can always hit our website up at Nexxt.com. That's NEXXT, so 2 X's, Nexxt.com. And I love this topic. I love to talk about, I geek out on anything recruiting technology. So would love to continue conversations on this topic or others, and can hit me up on LinkedIn. My profile and information is also up on our website. So would love to continue the conversation with anyone that's interested. It's fascinating to watch the evolution of these technologies. You get so excited about what they can do, and then you get a bit of a spoiler with the fraud side of it. But I am an optimist. I think there is a way through this where we're going to see the benefits outweigh the risks. We just have to stay vigilant on that side of it. But that's how we can connect.
Well, awesome. Well, Dwaine, thank you so much for joining us today.
And Shannon, it was great to see you. Always excited to work with direct employers on any topic around the future of work. So really appreciate the opportunity to get together.
Thank you for tuning in for another episode of the DE Talk podcast. Stay connected with direct employers on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, or subscribe to receive updates straight to your inbox by visiting directemployers.org/subscribe, where you'll receive notifications of new episodes, webinars, events, and more.